Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Voices of Esquao. I'm Shauna Yatsallie, and I'll be your host today as we explore conversations around Indigenous women in leadership. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're recording on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation of Alberta. We honor the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples whose footsteps have cared for this land for generations. In each episode, we also share a word from one of our languages. Today, our word is udale, a Dene word meaning melting. While it doesn't directly translate to spring, it describes the time when the snow begins to melt, marking the arrival of spring, a season of renewal, return, and new beginnings. And that spirit of renewal really grounds today's conversation, thinking about what it means to step into leadership, to grow into it, and to create new paths forward. I'm joined today by Taylor McPherson, who champions accessible sport and leadership development within Indigenous communities, and who many of you will recognize as one of the winners of Season 10 of the Amazing Race Canada. We're also joined by Christina Russell, Esquao's very own leadership coordinator, who works closely with women navigating leadership spaces and building tools for long-term impact. Today, we're getting into a real and important conversation. Why our communities need more Indigenous women and 2S people in leadership, the barriers we've faced and are still navigating, and what it really takes to step into leadership when the odds aren't always on your side. Thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to start with a big question. So this is kind of a two-part question. And Christina, I'll start with you from a program and systems perspective. Why is it important to have more Indigenous women and 2S people in leadership? And what shifts when those voices are present?
Thank you. Well, when Indigenous women lead, they shape funding, policies, hiring, and culture within organizations, workplaces, and they work with a community-based decision-making thought pattern. They're culturally accountable, and they practice long-term thinking instead of just short-term optics. We also see systems challenged, whether it's education, sport, governance, or corporate spaces, because Indigenous women bring lived resilience and innovation rooted in culture.
Mm-hmm.
We also see that with representation, that creates pathways for the next generation to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing that leadership inspires further leadership.
Yeah, for sure. I really do connect with that because growing up in an Indigenous community, which was pretty remote, I didn't see a lot of women in those leadership roles. So it's really nice to see that shift happening. Now you see more women stepping into those roles. I just want to circle back to something you mentioned about Indigenous leadership shaping funding, hiring, and culture. Could you just expand on that just a little bit for us?
I think an important part of policymaking is not only the business aspect of it, but the emotional aspect of it, the empathy for other people, and the respect and understanding that when someone is feeling heard, they will commit more, they will engage more, and they will be more passionate about whatever project you're running and whatever job they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone feels valued, they will in turn produce valuable work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that women have a more empathetic understanding of that in business.
Mm-hmm.
So still keeping in mind the business aspect, we can still be very articulate. We can still be having our procedures and our policies and making sure that we're following certain protocols, but we will also consider a holistic aspect to
Mm-hmm.
having someone running an organization or working within that organization.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's that's important, especially when you're dealing with Indigenous people who have experienced hardship. So having someone who's trauma informed.
Exactly. And the majority of these women in the Indigenous community have either lived it or have been touched by it with
Mm-hmm.
family, friends or just in their involvement in the community. Women are the center of the community, center of the home. So they probably have had a experience in all sorts of it. And so they have a unique ability to come at it from different directions.
Yeah, that's a really important point. When something is that widespread and personal, it kind of shapes how people understand it in a much deeper way. It's not just perspective, it's lived reality coming through. And Taylor, from your lived experience, especially through sports, what does Indigenous leadership look like to you?
Yeah, so Indigenous leadership to me, I mean, it means showing up and being visible for your community, right? For me growing up, I didn't have a lot of women wrestlers to look up in my sport, and especially Indigenous women wrestlers, right? There's
Hmm.
really ultimately no such thing as
Yeah,
that.
no.
So, to be, present and to be, just somebody for those younger generations to look up to within the sport or just across sports in general. We don't have enough Indigenous women in our sports systems leading as coaches, as athletes. And I think that's what is really important to me because, I didn't really have a lot of female mentors growing up. And so I think, especially in male dominated sports or even just sport in general, is such a male
Hmm.
dominated area that I think it's so important to have those female role models and mentors to help guide the girls through different life changes and things that they're going through that boys don't necessarily experience within sport.
So the importance of being visible so others can see the
Yeah.
possibility.
Hmm.
No. So historically, Indigenous women have faced barriers and have often had to navigate spaces where leadership wasn't always recognized or supported.
Hmm.
Today, some of those barriers have shifted, and unfortunately, some haven't.
Yeah.
So, Taylor, can we talk a little bit about the barriers you've faced personally?
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up, I was always proud to be First Nations. But being white passing, it was kind of hard to, blend in with my community or even just understand, what it means to be Indigenous. My mom wasn't raised with the culture, meaning I wasn't really raised with our culture. So I had to do a lot of like identity searching as I was growing up. But that often left me feeling like I was walking between two worlds, kids being like, "Oh, you're pretending in," or "You're not actually native, like you're not telling the truth." And obviously I was, and I was proud to be. So I think that was I wouldn't necessarily. It was a barrier to um, exploring my identity more, because I always felt that imposter syndrome. It's such a real thing, and lateral violence, but even systemic violence is still so prevalent within schools and every system we're really in. It's just like you're
Hmm.
either too native or you're not native enough,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's what I grew up a lot, thinking that way. But then, when I got into university, that was really a door, like an open door for me to really start exploring even more beyond what I had done in high school. And, even within the university settings, I was never a strong academic. I was always, kind of I was just like that athlete, the
Yeah.
jock
Yeah.
mentality. So I wasn't a strong student, but I took the transition year program at the U of A, and being surrounded by other natives in my community really helped me feel like I belong somewhere and helped me, become closer to my community just through schooling or through that program, right?
Hmm.
And some of which I'm still like in contact with 7 years later, which is awesome. But yeah, I did struggle academically. Like I always joke, I was on academic probation 4 out of my 5 years. But it's okay because we learn how to get through those struggles and we learn how to push through, and those systems weren't made for us to succeed all the time, right? And so you know just trying to understand that you do belong there and that you can be successful. If Taylor was on academic probation 4 times, anybody can get a degree.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it was just learning how to navigate, new spaces and, being away from home, but also trying to be an elite athlete all at the same time. It was hard in such a large institution that doesn't always have the perfect supports in place for both Indigenous students and elite athlete students. So, but there was a lot that, I had to work through and managed to work through because of that self drive, but also support from outside people. It could be my families, my mentors, my friends, my teammates. I got through it all because of the support that I had.
Yeah, that is so important, especially if you're a young Indigenous woman, 2S person who is coming to the city from an Indigenous community or even a small town, having those supports while you're navigating life in an urban setting is so important and
Yeah,
trying to find their place in society.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and I just want to circle back. You had mentioned navigating sports, your academic life, and also trying to find those supports that were not readily available.
Hmm.
Can you just touch on what did that look like on the days that were a struggle for you?
Oh, um, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in terms of, looking for supports when they're not always there, I did throughout my university career do a lot of like I did go to therapy and like, go to talk to people when I could, but even just through the systems, the university systems, they don't always have the best supports for those student athletes
Hmm.
in terms of therapy because like sometimes I go talk to the sport therapist and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, your problems are bigger than me." Like it's bigger than sport. And I'd be like, "Okay, so what now? Like what do I do now?" And it's okay to have problems that go beyond just what's in front of you, like your sport or your school. Like, I think a lot of us have grown up in certain life situations or home situations, right? And don't always know how to even talk about or navigate those feelings or
Hmm.
work through them. And, so therapy was sort of, it kind of helped me a little bit here and there, when I felt like I needed it the most. But I think navigating these systems, the support that I got most were from the transition year program. Like the lady who is running that, Suzanne, she's phenomenal. And, whenever I was struggling in school, I'd go to her, I'd be like, "Okay, I need help. Like I'm scared of gonna get kicked out of school. I'm scared I won't be able to wrestle." Cause that was the main reason I was in school because I wanted to wrestle. Like
Hmm.
you think the degree was the reason, but it was because I wanted to keep doing the thing I love the most. And so I think, for me, I really had to lean on my friendships and my coaches and, the support of my family, even though they weren't in Edmonton.
Yeah.
And I know not everybody always has that, right? But it's a matter of surrounding yourself with the people that are going to help lift you up and help push you forward in life. And I think that's the biggest thing to remember. A lot of our youth sometimes feel like, "Oh, I'm lost," or "I don't have anybody who cares about me or supports me." But I think, if you try to look for those people and surround yourself with them, it will come and it will happen. Like you will find that support group, but it's a matter of putting yourself out there and making sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. Speaking of putting yourself out there, the Amazing Race Canada.
Yeah.
We obviously have to talk
Oh,
about that for a second.
yeah.
Um, when you say that you have to step out of your comfort zone, you have to
Hmm.
push forward. So between everything you've done in sports and navigating an academic life at the U of A, do you ever find yourself thinking, okay, this is actually preparing me for something bigger? Like how it might have helped you handle the Amazing Race?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that one is always it's just like it's so crazy to think that we actually did that. And never in a million years would I ever think that I was going to be on a reality TV show. Like, are you kidding me? That's crazy. But I think the biggest thing, with that Amazing Race experience, talking to Katie, my best friend, my partner on the race, my teammate, one thing that we always say to kids is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? The second you get comfortable in life, that's where the growth comes to a halt, or you just sit there and you're just complacent or content with life. And then there's nothing wrong with that, but I think if you're truly looking to grow and looking to um just build up life experience, you need to put yourself in situations that make you feel totally uncomfortable. And the race was one of those situations for us. Coming from a wrestling background, we learned so many skills together. We learned how to work together as a team. We had seen each other through our highest highs and our lowest lows. We know how to communicate, and all of those skills transferred into the amazing race. And especially, learning how to work under pressure. So for us, then going on to the amazing race, it was like just another wrestling tournament, except for every single day we were competing in a wrestling
Yeah.
tournament over and over again, right? Um, but I think what really pushed us through the race and helped us be successful was our belief in one another, and the fact that we never once blamed one another for mistakes. We were there were just so many challenges. I'd be messing up. I wouldn't get the ball in the hoop and she'd be like, "It's okay, Taylor, it's all good." I'm there up crying. I'm like, "I can't do it." But she was the best friend and she was supporting me to you know, be the best I could be in those moments. And we both did that for each other. We showed up for one another every single day. And I think because of what we learned through wrestling and how to work with a team, that really transferred perfectly onto national TV.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think that's what made it feel so different. It wasn't just one person carrying that representation. There were multiple people during multiple seasons with different stories, different perspectives. It just makes it feel so much more full. And you're right, it doesn't happen by accident. It really is because of the people who came before and pushed for that space to even exist in the first place. Uh,
Exactly. It's huge. Like we were fortunate enough to have um, there was Michael Linklater and Amari Linklater. They were um Indigenous father and son duo. We had Olivia, she's Indigenous herself, and then there was me as well. And it's just so important to have those people there representing and being a voice for our community. And even this season, we saw even more Indigenous people on Amazing Race Canada. So I think it's just really cool to see how they are, opening this space for us. But it's because of the ones who came before us who broke down those doors and those barriers, right?
yes, yes. And it's honestly really cool to see how that's growing each season, seeing Indigenous people from different backgrounds representing the Indigenous community the way they are on these reality TV shows. Like you see it in The Amazing Race Canada, you see it in Family Feud, and it's growing, and it's such an amazing thing to see happen in real time. And Christina, from the leadership programs you coordinate, what are you hearing are the barriers women are still facing today? What are your participants saying? What are some of the ladies you have on your panel, like guest speakers? Like what are they saying about the barriers that we still see happening in 2026?
As Taylor mentioned, if you don't see yourself in those roles, you have a tendency to shrink
Mhm.
and you don't feel like you belong. And so, with that leadership, it's really helping. And when you mention sometimes forcing yourself to be uncomfortable, so that's something I really emphasize with my participants, to feel uncomfortable, to chase that a little bit, to get into it and force yourself to overcome that uncomfortableness, to learn how to cope with that. And I think it's easier for them the more they see it and the more that they hear from the people in those leadership roles that that's what they through to. So that relatability, humanizing those feelings, and understanding once there is more leadership that you don't have that pressure to represent the entire community, that you're not doing it alone. I think there are a lot of women that come to our programs who they're scared. Their public speaking started and they were scared to speak. And now they're emceeing and they're facilitating
Mhm.
things and they're sitting on speaker panels or doing podcasts, right?
Mhm.
And so you see that grow and that momentum grow. And again, as Taylor mentioned, that support from one another. It's so
Mhm.
important. That's the backbone of our group and our organization, to support and build you up and make you feel like you can do it,
Mhm.
regardless of whether or not you do it perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps with one of those barriers. Increasing the mentorship, the sponsorship, and that again is what we do with our programming. The burnout from carrying the cultural expectations, learning as you go along that every different aspect of Indigenous has different cultural practices, respecting each other's, learning from each other. So breaking down that barrier of believing that your way is the only way.
Mhm.
So that's a good barrier to overcome that we're working on with mixing groups. The need to navigate the environments that are not culturally safe or responsive. We have a lot of participants that are in very male-dominated industries. Start with
Mm-hmm.
that, let alone just a regular industry that maybe doesn't respect Indigenous culture. Those are other barriers. And the dynamics of the community. Sometimes you're expected to stay within the community and not venture out of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to go against that grain, against those messages that they're receiving. And they have to learn how to trust more in the outside world, trust more in other organizations and communities. And then there's the financial restraints. There are a lot of women who come to the financial literacy program, and there are times when, because they are not the income earners, because they are supported by someone else, they are limited in their voice. And so we need to teach them that they have a voice regardless of their monetary contribution, and how to increase that so that they feel empowered.
I love how you framed that. What you said about shrinking when you don't see yourself and then growing once you do. That really resonated with me personally because it is so real. And I also really appreciate how you highlighted that shift from feeling like you have to carry everything alone to realizing there's a whole community beside you. That's huge, especially when people start stepping into leadership themselves and then become that example for others. And that actually brings me to my next question. And I want to get both of your perspectives on this. So, what do you think changes when diverse voices are part of leadership and decision making?
When you have different opinions and different perspectives, this helps to change the policies, the hiring in groups, and understanding different contributions and how they benefit as a team. The safety of expressing your culture and being comfortable in your culture and being who you are improves. And if you are represented, again, you see that as an example of, okay, I can be here and I can take up this space.
Yeah. What she said. No, just kidding. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, when diverse voices are leading, it shows again that possibility, and it starts to instill a sense of belief within yourself, right?
Hmm.
And I think for Indigenous people, when we see more of our people succeeding and leading and taking up space within spaces we weren't meant to be in before, it really creates this powerful drive for our community to
Hmm.
want to do more, and for our younger ones especially, to say, hey, now I can do this, I can do that, and I can be just like that person. And I think for us, like, whether it's being on the wrestling mat and being a national medalist and being a world team member, or being on the Amazing Race Canada, it's again showing the kids like we did this, you can do this next. But really showing up for yourself and creating that self-belief. I know for Katie and I, especially when we were on the Amazing Race, one of the biggest things that we had to do is just understand the process and believe that like we could do this, but it took one step at a time. we couldn't rush through this race. We couldn't
Mhm.
skip challenges. We couldn't take the easy route. There's no such thing as that there. Right. And so for us, we had to just push through every single challenge and just believe that we could do it. And
Mhm.
a lot of that belief was also grounded in our smudging. Every morning before we started our race, we smudged. We grounded ourselves in a good way. We gave thanks to the creator for, the challenges that were given to us the day before and the challenges that were to come. And we just asked for that guidance and that strength from the ancestors, and obviously hoped for the best. But along that journey there were so many signs that, like, hey, we're on the right track. We're in the place we're meant to be right now. And I think, um again, just by being that person doing this crazy thing, it just inspires hope and, you know, dreams for our youth who are wanting to do similar things.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's so important to see cultural practices like smudging and prayer being carried forward and spoken about openly. And hearing you talk about it, it shows a strong connection to your traditions, especially as a young person. That's so meaningful. I also think that there's something powerful in you sharing that here today on this podcast because it lets our young listeners know that it's okay to embrace those practices openly and be proud of them. It feels like another step towards breaking down those barriers and normalizing that connection to culture, tradition, and ceremony, especially out in the open.
100%. And like, if I can add something on there too, like, when we're on the race, I had like a cookum scarf on my bag. I wore Indigenous brands. I wore my earrings just to, like, just have that presence or that visibility, right? But even in sport, I'll put like cookum laces in my wrestling boots. I put sage in my boots so that I'm protected when I'm wrestling or I'm grounded. Um, I'll smudge before I do my big tournaments or any tournament really, smudge my boots, smudge myself, feel grounded. And I practice that with Katie too. Like before our
Hmm.
national championships where we both won, where our team won, we sat in my apartment and smudged before that, right? And just, yeah, like you're saying, like letting the youth know it's okay to bring our practices into westernized systems and spaces. That's why, something like the North American Indigenous Games is so amazing. It was like the first time that I've ever been around sport and culture at the same time, where culture was so prevalent within westernized sports.
Hmm.
And that was like a really big deal for me because I was here, there as a coach, and I was like, man, I wish I had this growing up because we didn't have a Team Alberta wrestling team for NAIG
Yeah.
when I was wrestling, right? I knew of NAIG, but I couldn't go for my sport.
Hmm.
And so for me to be able to design indigenized singlets for the youth, having our Indigenous Team Alberta logo, having feathers on their singlets, having medicine wheel colors, whatever it is they wanted, they saw themselves in that singlet. They saw themselves in this sport and they showed up and represented Team Alberta. And then also just being out there able to smudge before our tournament together as a team. And I brought those practices into the Canada Summer Games, which I
Hmm.
did not have one Indigenous athlete on that Canada Summer Games team,
Wow.
but the girls still chose to smudge before they wrestled. So I thought that was pretty cool to be able to now bring that into the westernized sports system.
Yes. What you're both describing is really the ripple effect of leadership. When representation grows, opportunity grows too. And that's actually something Esquao has been celebrating for many years through the Esquao Awards, which honor Indigenous women across Alberta who are leading and creating change in their communities. This year actually marks the 30th annual Esquao Awards, taking place May 7th, 2026 at the River Cree Resort and Casino. If you'd like to learn more about the awards, you can visit our website at iaaw.ca. So, we've been talking about the barriers Indigenous women continue to face in leadership spaces, but also the resilience and determination it takes to move through them. Taylor, for Indigenous women or 2S leaders who feel that pull toward leadership but may feel unsure about stepping forward, what advice would you give them?
I'd say just do it anyways. Even if you're scared, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's so many things in life that scare us. And if we chose not to do it every single time, we'd stay, in our apartments all scared and hurt, like, away from the world, right?
Hmm.
So I think the biggest thing is, like, just do it anyways, even if you're scared. And I know it sounds like it's not that easy. It's not that easy to just do it, but sometimes you just have to step out of that comfort zone and do it anyways. And I think for me too, a lot of the things that I've been able to accomplish, I think have come from that belief within myself. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, like I had so much support from the people around me, but the people around me weren't the ones who were going to achieve those goals for me, right? And so I truly had to believe that I could do all of those things. And a lot of that self belief or manifestation or putting it out in the universe, whatever you want to call it, came from, creating vision boards, writing down my goals in attainable ways, and ensuring that I saw what I wanted to achieve every single day. If I woke up, I went to my fridge, saw my vision board there, I say, okay, these are the things I'm going to achieve this year. And that even just helps us move forward in a good way, and helps foster that belief, helps foster that good path, that good energy, right? So, yeah, I'd say just do it anyways, even if you're scared. We do so many scary things in our life, and taking risk is one of the biggest things that's scary. But every time I've taken a risk, it's paid off in a good way, and I think it could be the same for anyone else.
I agree with you there 100%. Step out of your comfort zone, push yourself through, even if you're faced with struggle, barriers, like you
Hmm.
said, it's always paid off.
Hmm.
What about those who feel stuck and aren't sure what direction to take?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been times where I feel stuck and I'm like, what am I doing next? I feel like I'm kind of one of those people that's constantly chasing the next big thing. So, I can never I'm never content just staying where I am, but then I'm also at this like crossroads where I'm like, okay, but what is my next step? And I think again, just really laying out goals that you may have is kind of the first step in getting unstuck, because I think, when you can write down, okay, what is it that I'm really trying to do with my life, or what is it that I'm wanting to achieve, and how do I move forward? Well, I think writing down those dreams first will help you create that path forward. But also like talking with those around you, sharing those goals, sharing those dreams, so that people can hold you accountable as well, right? Again, really depending on the community that you surround yourself with. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're not surrounded by the right people, go find the right people, right? Step into spaces where you can be surrounded by positive people who will help you achieve that next step or those dreams or those goals.
Cliches sometimes are so true. And so I always, my children always told them, if you're not going to do it, someone else will. So
Mhm.
you'll have to watch someone else succeed in what it is you're wishing you could do. So I think it's very important to, again, just start. Often in our leadership course, we teach 5 seconds of bravery, where you just kind of take your deep breath, put your feet down, and dig in. And you just get started and don't give yourself enough time to second think. And with my daughters, again, I often would say the feeling of regret is worse
Mhm.
than the feeling of fear, because the feeling of fear you can do something about. Regret is
Mhm.
done, and you'll always hold on to that if you're wishing you had done it.
Hmm.
It's really important, again, as Taylor mentioned, to have those mentorships, to surround yourself with people who you have a kinship with, who have the same frame of mind, and just go for it. Even if you don't think you're qualified, you can learn and you can grow with those people around you. It's important to remember that Indigenous women have always been leaders, and stepping forward is an act of continuity, strength, and healing. So it's not something that's new to us. And I don't think you should wait until you're fully ready. Confidence often follows action. Embrace your resilience as a leadership strength. Seek mentorship and practice humility. Very important as a leader to understand all the other perspectives and paths that others take, and know that you can learn from everyone. And the more, obviously, as we've mentioned, the more that you learn, the more you grow.
Yeah, I think that's such an important reminder that leadership and success aren't linear.
Yeah.
There are moments of progress, moments of doubt, and moments where it feels like you're standing still, but each of those experiences still moves you forward in some way. And today we heard about belief as a practice, using your traditional beliefs to help guide you through those difficult situations, whether you're prepping for a wrestling match or, a day on Amazing Race Canada or before public speaking.
Yeah.
We heard about sport as leadership training and why Indigenous women and 2S leaders reshape systems simply by showing up. And hearing both of your perspectives today reminds us that leadership isn't about having a perfect path. It's about continuing to show up, learn, and grow along the way. Taylor, Christina, thank you both for being part of the conversation today. It was such a pleasure sitting down with you.
Thanks so much for having us.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Voices of Esquao. Don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube to stay tuned for more stories, voices, and conversations. Until next time, this has been Voices of Esquao. Join us for the 30th Annual Esquao Awards taking place May 7th, 2026 at the River Cree Resort and Casino. If you'd like to learn more about the awards, you can visit our website at iaaw.ca.